Hello, Soundies. Welcome to our Sound for Video session. Today is the 6th, whistling. Sorry about that. 6th of July, 2025. It's good to have you all here. Hope you're all doing well, staying cool or staying warm, depending on where you're at. Let's go to our agenda really quick here and see what we've got going. This one's a simple one. It's a question and answer session. We haven't done one of these for a while, and I realized that So originally I set them up as question and answer sessions starting 10 years ago, by the way, almost to the day. And that was when we launched our very first course over at school, thoughtlearnlightandsound.com. And people would show up and every once in a while have a question, but not very often. We were just getting started then. And after a while, I started introducing topics for the sessions just because I knew there weren't going to be enough questions to fill the time. But then I realized maybe people aren't submitting questions because there's a topic. I don't know. So today we'll just try a question and answer session and see how that goes. So we will go ahead and jump straight into this. We will have time to talk about some other things, and I have a couple things prepared in case we have that time. But we'll also come and spend some time in the chat. So here we go with our first question. This is from Dick F. I often shoot video in a room with 60 to 80 people. I use lav mics for the presenter. What is the best mic and recorder to use to capture questions from the audience when there is no roving mic to capture their audio to sync in post? Okay, this is a great question, and a lot of people run into this. So, Dick, I will say there's probably, if there's some more context, we might be able to get straight to the answer, but let me just talk about a few different concepts and things to consider. And all of you in the chat, if you've got ideas here for Dick as well, that would be awesome. Dick, if you're here, if I'm going to say some things, maybe there's some additional information you can provide. First of all, is this a paid job or is this just a volunteer thing? Second, what kind of support do you have in terms of placing a microphone? In other words, if you were to place a microphone, would you get resistance from whoever is running this event or these events? I don't know what the event is or what they look like or anything like that. Because here's the reality. There is the laws of physics dictate that the way sound waves propagate, the best way to get a clean recording is for the sound source, a person talking in this case, being closer to the microphone than all of the other sound that you're less interested in picking up. That's called a signal-to-noise ratio. You want to optimize your signal-to-noise ratio generally. But then there's also the context of what these meetings are. Would it be too imposing? It's a volunteer project. Okay, no problem placing mics. Brilliant. Okay, thank you so much, Dick. That makes a huge difference. What I would do is I would put a microphone on a stand and I would have the people that come to ask the question walk up to the microphone and ask the question. That would be the easiest one. Roving mics are not terribly difficult either. They can take a little bit of time, but that also helps the experience. If you're recording it or live streaming it or whatever you're doing, that can help a lot as well. You could put an omnidirectional microphone suspended from the ceiling or maybe in a stand somewhere in the center of the audience, if that's not too imposing. The problem is that you're not optimizing the signal-to-noise ratio in that case. So will it pick it up? Probably. Will it be really noisy and potentially hard to hear? Probably, but that's another option. There are new technologies that are being introduced all the time. When I was at NAB this last year, Robert and Matt and I were over at the Shure booth and they showed us their microphone arrays, which are these, what are they, I think they're 1 meter by 1 meter roughly, an array of some hundred number of little microphones, and they do beam forming and all this other stuff. And they use them primarily, it looks like, for sporting events, but they also sometimes use them in conference rooms. I don't know if you have a budget to work with. It sounds like you're doing it volunteer, so probably not a budget for something like that, but that's that's something you'll probably see more of in the future. They're still not amazing. They're still not the same as someone walking up to a microphone and talking within 5 inches of a microphone, but it is less imposing from the standpoint that you don't have to have someone running a microphone around, or you don't have to have someone come up to the microphone. But I think for all practical purposes, if this is a volunteer thing and you're not getting paid to do it, if there's any way you could set up a microphone and have the question askers come up to the microphone, I think that would be ideal. As far as recorders, if you've got I don't know what kind of camera you're using, but if you're running camera as well, and you have two microphone inputs, then I would just go straight into camera. If not, you could use something like a Zoom F3 if you just want something really small. Yeah, so those are some thoughts. If any of you have other ideas, by all means, share them in the chat here. We'd love to hear other ideas that you have. And Dick, if you have further questions, go ahead and put them in the chat as well. You've tried Field Recorder, which sort of worked. I'm assuming that you mean, Dick, that you use something like a handy recorder with built-in microphones. And yeah, that's the kind of experience you're going to get if you place pretty much any kind of microphone in the audience and just leave it there and expect that when someone asks a question from their seat, that it's going to pick it up. It'll sort of work. But if you're trying to get a better audio experience, you probably need to optimize that signal-to-noise ratio. All right, let's move to the next question. Thank you so much for that, Dick. Here's a question from Alexander, a timely question. I recently installed the new version of Pro Tools, and there's a new speech-to-text feature, and I tried it out. But as with all of these apps, it's less than perfect and does not transcribe speech perfectly. I mainly work with dialogue, podcasts primarily, and this is a welcome feature, but I don't think the software is quite there yet. Having said that, it's a whole lot better than the similar feature in Isotope RX. What are your thoughts, and which app is the best at this? Alexander, I think my experience so far has been that none of them are perfect. The ones that I have had the best experience with so far is DaVinci Resolve's transcription, speech to text. That one works pretty well, although it also is not perfect, but it does a pretty good job. In fact, I use that for making the captions for my YouTube videos over on my main channel. So we actually run it through DaVinci Resolve's transcription, and then we have a human being go through it and clean it up, and then we upload that to YouTube along with the video to do the captions. So that one's been the best in my experience. I have found that YouTube's is okay as long as there are no technical terms. It really gets muddled up with technical terms. I think most of them do. Isotope RX's, when I tested it on version 11 when it first came out, was pretty awful. I haven't tested it again since then. I don't know. I haven't done Pro Tools yet, so I don't know what that's like. But my experience is DaVinci Resolve has been the best at it so far. Again, not perfect, but pretty good. Oh, here's one. Is the DaVinci one in the free version as well, or only in the paid one? Great question. I think it's only in the paid one. I think most of the AI features, and they're considering that, I think one of the AI features are in the studio version, which is very affordably priced at $295.
Can we go back to the previous question?
Back to the previous question. Here we are.
He says,
yes, Tascam DR40X recorder. Okay, yeah, that explains it. So yeah, that's the kind of experience you're going to get with pretty much any microphone placed just within the audience and not moving it around and not having the question askers come up to the, gosh, I'm whistling today. Sorry about that. And not have the question askers come up to the microphone. It's going to be about that kind of experience, pretty much, unless you go to these very sophisticated microphone array kind of things, which are pricey, thousands of dollars. Okay. More. Matt says, at a church, we do this all the time and just put a mic in the aisle for people to go to. Simple, and it works. Yeah, I agree. Mike says, I like Curtis's placed mic on a stand where people go to ask questions. Simplest solution, also helpful for camera because you're going back to a fixed point or can have a dedicated camera. That's a great point, Mike. So that also helps from a camera perspective as well. All right. Glad that created some talk, also some chatter. And also on Alexander's, if any of you have experience with other speech-to-text capabilities, whatever it is, let us know. Very interested to hear what you have to say. One thing I did learn this week at work, obviously there's always a push to use AI whenever you can to do tasks faster. And I learned that, for example, ChatGPT does not train on videos. It only trains on written word as of right now. And I think a lot of that's the truth, or that's the case with all of the mainstream large language models, just FYI, which is interesting. This one is tiny text, and I apologize for that, but I'm going to read it to you, so not to worry. I recently picked up a Rode Wireless Pro at a good discount. I'm keen to try using the two transmitters as separate 32-bit float recorders along with the receiver for generating timecode and monitoring. From the user manual, I understand timecode can be sent from the receiver to the transmitters and saved with the onboard transmitter recordings. I've not really used timecode before, as I generally record audio rather than audio for video. Do you have any tips on how to set this up so I can get a stereo recording from the two transmitters synced via timecode? I'm hoping to use this as a simple, light, and portable way to implement the tree ears field recording technique without any cables. As this creates a quasi-binaural recording with microphones placed around a tree trunk approximately the same width of a human head, precise alignment of the two recordings is needed. Okay, that is a very clever solution, by the way, Ewan. I've never heard of anyone doing that, but that's clever thinking. I think there's a challenge there, though. If we consider SMPTE timecode is it's based on frames, and those are camera frames. So how many frames per second you're filming at. So that's the thing with timecode is it works that way. So it's only accurate to the frame. The problem is if, for example, if you are filming at 30 frames per second, each frame is 33.3 milliseconds long. So when you talk about frame accuracy, even though the camera frame and the audio will appear synced up, they can be up to 33 milliseconds off and still be frame accurate. So the problem with audio is that 33 milliseconds is a lot of time, and that can really mess with the phase relationships between the two channels. So I think you can do that with the kit that you have. I would try it and see how it goes. But I would expect that you may have to nudge, bringing the audio recordings into post-production, you may have to nudge them a little bit to get them lined up appropriately. Now, the thing with binaural recordings like this when you're using a tree, which, by the way, is a technique I'd never heard of, but it's quite interesting. And some of us do have very dense heads like a tree. But the thing that's interesting about binaural recordings is it relies on the phase relationship between the two microphones is critically important to getting the stereophonic effect, or the binaural effect, which is beyond, it's a kind of different than just regular stereo. So I think it's going to be really sensitive. So I don't mean to rain on your parade, but I think it's worth experimenting and trying it and see how it goes. Any tips on how to set it up? Just follow the manual. The Rode online guide for using the Rode Wireless Pro is very simple and straightforward and effective. So I would do that. Make sure that you're outputting or I guess you're just recording on the transmitter, so I don't think you have anything to worry about there. But just go through the section on timecode, get that set up so that the receiver is sending timecode to the two transmitters, and I think you'll be in a good spot. If the Rode Wireless Pro is incredibly accurate, as long as the receiver is sending that timecode wirelessly back to the transmitters, it might be that you don't have to do anything. It might be that it works. I just don't know. You'd have to try it and see how it happens, see how it goes. If you were looking for alternatives, if you try that and you find that doesn't work, what you might consider instead, if we go to the Mac here, a stereo pocket recorder might be a better option for you, because then you're not worried. Then you're recording everything into a single recorder with the same analog stereo input, like the Deity Pocket, the Deity PR2 pocket recorder. And this has a stereo input. It's 24-bit. It's not 32-bit float. It's 24-bit when you're in stereo mode. But they also offer a microphone, specifically a dual-headed lavalier microphone that plugs directly into that recorder and records stereo to that recorder. So this could make things a lot easier for you if the Rode Wireless Pro does not work out. So again, that'd be also sacrificing 32-bit float if that's important to you. So those are some thoughts. If anyone has other ideas in the chat, please let our friend Ewan know.
Can we go to the main camera because we've got comments on both the last questions?
Of course. Danny asked if we could go to the main camera. We have questions. We have comments on the last two questions, it looks like.
Okay.
Here we go. Okay, DaVinci Girl. The DaVinci Resolve transcription is just a mix of Isotope and Google. Best results are different engines together to use. I do not speak one word of English, and we use an incredible PBX phone line. So I speak in my phone in Romanian, and our PBX doing speech to text, translate Romanian, and post to this chat. Oh, very good. Okay, interesting. I didn't realize that. Audio to text, subtitle edit with fast whisper, using it all the time, and resolve. Udo, thank you so much for sharing that. And DaVinci Girl, thank you for sharing that.
I don't know what this is referring to.
Okay, we're going to bring one up here and see if we can decipher it. I use the Deity HETX and Connect Deity boom mic. This is from Alexander. Sync later in post.
I don't know what that's referring to.
Yeah, not sure. We may have missed that, Alexander. Sorry about that.
Okay, and then...
And one more here. I would think Genlock would be the only way, Ewan. That's, okay, great point. So Genlock, let me just describe what Genlock is so that we understand the distinction there. Of course, there's no Genlock in the Rode recorders. Yes, correct. From Chris there. Genlock is a different system where you have a master clock that is connected, usually, I think maybe they have wireless ones now, but traditionally by wire. And it is the Genlock master clock that is responsible for telling the devices when to take a sample or when to take a frame. Usually they're connected to cameras and they're telling the cameras. So if you're doing a two camera, like stereophonic, is that the right word? I don't even know. 3D kind of capture with two different cameras, you need them to be synced perfectly in terms of their frames. So you would use Genlock and the Genlock master clock tells the cameras, okay, take a frame, so that they're doing it exactly in tandem. And that's the difference with Genlock. With timecode, all timecode is doing is that when you start a recording, it stamps what the very high accuracy clock says at the time of the start of the recording, and then it uses that. You can start on multiple devices, and then in post, you line them up based on that timestamp. So it's not as if timecode is constantly telling the recorders when to take a sample. Instead, they're just saying, okay, this was the time when you started the recording. And then they extrapolate the time to every frame, and then they find a common frame and line them up. So that's the difference between those two. Okay. All right, so that's Ewan's question. Ewan, hopefully that helps a little bit. Don't know what your requirements are entirely, but I would try it. Since you've already picked up the Rode Wireless Pro, give it a go and see what you get. That's a really interesting technique, and I'm curious to hear how you get on with that. I don't know. This is not really a question, but this is from Matt Ruff. Makes me chuckle every time I get an email from Matt Ruff because they look like this. And he said, had a good week, new grandchild, a grandchild, third birthday. So it's been a very exciting week in the Ruff family, it looks like. Learned nothing about sound, probably forgot things because of no use. That makes me a little sad, Matt, but understood. It's rare you don't have a topic. That's true. The reason I don't have a topic is do you remember a few weeks ago we did the RGB link switcher with the mic inputs and we couldn't get the mic inputs working? I'm all for doing workshops, but I feel like I'm wasting people's time when I do stuff like that, when I'm just exploring for the very first time. So I'm a little hesitant to do that. For example, today I was considering actually showing you. Actually, let's go to the main camera, Danny, for just a moment here. This is a control surface, a MIDI controller from a company called Icon. It's the P1M, and it has the add-on screen up here. We'll talk, if we have time and people are interested, we'll talk more about it. It is also compatible with the Sound Devices 8 series recorders, so you can use it as a controller for the 8 series. I have 50% of it working, but this control surface has this really neat feature over here. Trying to get the light on it just right so you can see. There we go. It is basically like a Stream Deck. They're not physical buttons, they're capacitive touch buttons, but they're assignable. So they have screens behind each one. You can customize them, and they can do all sorts of different things. So they kind of sort of work. I haven't figured out how to program them exactly, but I've got the gain working, I've got the faders working, I've got the EQ working, I've got a bunch of other things working. So I was hesitant to do a whole showcase on this thing when I don't have some of the 16 touch buttons are really, that's like a really huge part of this whole thing, what makes it unique, but I don't have them working yet. So anyway, so that's why we don't have a specific topic. And also I wanted to experiment with this idea of, if I don't have a topic, does that give people more space to ask the questions they want to ask? Are people hesitating to ask questions because there's a topic? So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how this one goes. So far, I'm enjoying it. I hope you are as well. He says, I was going to think up some crazy off-the-wall question, but decided to be nice. Rare, I know. I don't know about that being rare, but okay, fair enough. Just a reminder, channel memberships and Discord will require that you, on occasion, talk about them. LOL, Matt Ruff. All right, Matt. So Matt and I have been cooking something up here. Over on my main YouTube channel, we now have the ability to sign up for a membership. And if you do, you get access to, we're setting up this private Discord server where we can go and have discussions. We can have voice chats. We can have video chats. But I haven't talked about them yet. And the reason I haven't talked about them yet is I haven't fully tested that setup yet. So you can actually go sign up today if you're interested over on the main channel, Curtis Judd on YouTube. But I'm not 100% on how to, I've got the integration set up, I think, but I need to test it is the only thing. So if you're interested, you can find that over on our main channel. And we're going to get going. Right now, it's just me and Matt in the Discord. But there's more coming on that. So Matt, thank you. It's always a pleasure to have our resident troublemaker, as he is self-proclaimed. All right, those are the questions that were submitted ahead of time. Let me talk about a few other things. Let's go back to our main camera here.
We have more questions.
Oh, we have questions in the chat. Let's go back to the chat then.
Did I get this right?
Main channel on YouTube, Curtis Judd. That's correct. That's correct. So if you're interested in the membership, that's where we'll do it. Now, let me also share some perspective on that. Why not just set up a social media channel like a Facebook group? Social media in its current iteration is kind of waning. I think you've probably noticed. Most of the social media platforms are just, there's always a problem. If you get a free membership, the problem is that you become the product. And what that means is they're going to be throwing advertisements at you left and right. And I just don't, for a discussion, where we are trying to learn things, I don't want that kind of experience for us. So we're doing Discord instead, where we can have a conversation without being bombarded with all this nonsense. And there's not some algorithm that's choosing what we get to see or not see. So that's the thinking behind it. Okay, back to the chat.
This is 2 parts.
2 parts from Graham. I use the Focusrite Solo with a Rode M5 mic to do voiceover direct to Premiere Pro on a Mac Studio. The gain knob has to be on max to even get close to a reasonable level. Peaks at minus 12 dB. 48 volt phantom power is on. Am I doing something wrong? Whew, good question. Let's see what we can find here. We're going to go over to the Rode microphones site. So Danny, if you want to come over here, we'll look at microphones. The M5, let's see here. I think that's going to be under...
There
Yeah, studio.
No, it was live.
It was live?
Oh, no, sorry.
It should be under studio, I think. M5, here we go. Matched pair small diaphragm condenser mics. Okay. We're going to look at the specifications on this. Here we go. Sensitivity, minus 34 dB. So that's not the most sensitive for relative to 1 volt per Pascal. Not the most sensitive microphone. So is it, and then the Rode, or sorry, the Focusrite Scarlett Solo. I don't know which generation you have, but I don't think that, certainly the earlier generations didn't supply very much gain. So that would not necessarily surprise me, to answer your question, Graham. So that might not be you doing anything wrong at all, just the combination of the microphone and the audio interface and how much gain it can supply. So not very sensitive mic, audio interface that cannot necessarily supply a ton of gain. The later gen, I don't know if the later gen, I know the 2i2 supplies more gain now than it used to. If I go to the Focusrite site, we are, okay, help. Okay, products, we want our Scarlett. Okay, we have the Solo. I wonder if they're going to give us specifications that are that detailed. Okay, specs. Gain range 57 dB. Yeah, it's not, this is the current generation, so even the current one is not a ton of gain, but yeah, I guess, Graham, I don't think you're necessarily doing anything wrong. I think it's just the combination of devices. It's my best guess. Peter Pepper. Hi. Or Peeper, I'm not sure how you say that, Peter. Hi, I need a small monitor around max 10-inch screen to use for metering plugins. Has anyone used small monitors for cameras? The ones for laptops with USB, I think, have too much latency to be useful. I don't have any experience with a 10-inch screen, unfortunately. I also am not 100%. Yeah, you'll want to watch carefully on the specs for the latency, because if you need very low latency, you're going to watch, yeah, you'll just want to watch that spec, which it sounds like you're already cognizant of that. So keep an eye out for that. Small HD is a company I've heard of that makes pretty quality stuff. OC makes some quality stuff, but I don't know that the latency is super low, especially if you're going out HDMI. SDI is usually a little faster, but I don't know that any of them are super low latency. I think I'm assuming you're looking for something like 3 milliseconds or less. So let us know in the chat. Lucas, I record electronic music festivals. I usually grab sound from the mixer, but I also want to grab ambient sound as well as crowd sound. Problem here is the environment level and the dB SPL limit of the analog to digital converter. That's what we have. Okay. Yes. Depends on what microphone and which recorder you're using for the crowd sound. That's where something like the new Zoom H5 Studio might be helpful, or using microphones with a nice max SPL spec, and also a recorder that has a max input level that can handle that. So here, for example, let's see if they've got that here. Oh wait, this was the instrument inputs that I was looking at here before. I may have gotten that wrong, Graham. Microphone inputs, still 57 dB, so we did get it right. Okay. The maximum input level is plus 9.5 dBu. So this is a spec that you'll want to watch as well, because basically you can gain down you can gain down, but you want to watch this spec right here, because if a lot of, for example, the Zoom F series recorders, some of them, at least the F3, I think, and the F6, the max input level is something like plus 4 dBu. Traditional mixing boards are like plus 18 up to a plus 24 dBu. The Sound Devices Mix Pre, I think, is plus 16 dBu. So what I'm saying here is that you need to kind of watch that spec as well, because if the microphone output is pretty hot, even when you gain down, it still may exceed that. So that's another thing. A trick you can do, if it's really, really loud, is switch the input on the recorder to line level. Connect your mic. Some of the recorders, if it's a condenser mic, some of the recorders can go to line level and supply phantom power at the same time. I think, for example, I believe the Zoom F8N Pro can do that. So that's another option there. So in essence, what you're doing is you're increasing your headroom there, giving yourself a little more headroom to handle that situation. So hopefully that helps, some perspective there. Is the icon compatible with the Mix Pre's? Good question. Let's ask. Let's check. If we come over here to the Mac, Sound Devices has a third-party accessories for Sound Devices products here, and the icon P1M is only compatible with the 833, 888, and the Scorpio. However, if you scroll down, there are a bunch of additional control surfaces, some of which are compatible with the Nano Control 2, Launch Control XL, MIDI Mix. Just scroll through this whole page here and you can find all of the different control surfaces that are compatible with the Mix Pre series. So it looks like there are a few more options than when I first looked at them. Originally, I think there were 3 options. It looks like there are at least 4 now. So, and there's some for the 8 series I didn't realize as well. For example, I think it's the Behringer. There's some cool little ones made by Location Sound London. If you just need faders. Oh, here's our friend from Bioluminous making knobs there. But it was, here's one. I had no idea about this one. The IDT8, the 8 Plus, the X Touch from Behringer. I didn't realize that was compatible with the 888, but in any case, there are a lot of options out there now, more than I realized. Chris, for you, and best way is to use a clapboard at the beginning of the recording and a second one at the end for sync. Yep, good input. Thanks for that, Chris. Mike says, good morning, Curtis. Recommendation for 8-channel immersive mic with high SPL for Foley capture at airport runways. We'll be using with Mix Pre 310, budget in 4 to 6K range. Thanks as always. Apologies for misspell of your name. No worries, Mike. I don't know if you're looking for an 8-channel immersive mic. Did I read that right? I don't have familiarity. So I have the Sennheiser Ambio, which is a 4-channel. But I don't think it's particularly high SPL handling either. Let's look at the Sennheiser Ambio microphone. Give me just a moment here to pull that up. It's the Ambio VR mic. Here it is. You've probably seen this, but let's look at the specifications. Actually 130 dBA for 1 kilohertz. That's pretty good. So that's the only one that I really have experience with, to be honest, Mike. I haven't used any of the 8-channel. I don't know if that's the next order of Ambisonics or what that is, but no, the only one I have experience with is this Sennheiser Ambio VR. Does anyone out there can help our friend Mike out? I would really appreciate the input. DaVinci Girl, do you have any experience with that? Okay, OG. Thoughts on the UltraSync Blue. I happen to notice that both my Fuji XH2S and my H5 Studio support it. In theory, it sounds like a convenient way to get syncing a little easier. The thing that, my thoughts on it, I don't understand which cameras it works with except for phones. So if you're filming with a phone, then I think that's probably great. But if you're filming with a dedicated camera, There may be a couple now that are compatible with it, but when I tested it out originally, there were no cameras compatible with it. Just either mobile, like a tablet or a phone was the only thing. So with tablet and phone could be a good option with other cameras, and just make sure your camera's compatible. I don't know of any cameras that are. There may be some, I just don't know. Again, anyone in the community, if you know about that, please let us know. All right, Bambi Broadcast. Curtis, do you have videos on how to combine sounds for a more dynamic range? Combined sounds for a more dynamic range. I'm not sure I understand the question. I apologize. If you want to clarify, happy to take another shot at it. Lilliput from Zircon. Lilliput, it's Lilliput, as I understand it, makes a cheap teleprompter monitor, 10.4 inch for around $200. Not sure of latency, but input is HDMI. Yeah, very good. Thank you. Yes, so some of the companies that make fairly affordable monitors include Lilliput, OC, OSEE. Usually they're Chinese brands that make those. So if you wanted to check those out, take a look at OC's site as well. Lilliput and OC are worth checking. Thanks for that. Okay, Shoji. Any recommendations for an external 2 terabyte SSD that will be used for audio video editing? Thanks. I'm so glad you brought that up, Shoji, because this is one of the topics I had prepared. I have right here a Mac Mini, the M4 Mac Mini. This is the latest generation of Mac Mini. The base model, $599 US for this. It has 3 Thunderbolt 4 ports on the back, an HDMI port which supports 4K, a gigabit Ethernet. This is the power port. On the front, it has a headphone jack and 2 USB-C ports. Spec-wise, if we come over to the Mac here, according to Apple's site, this is a 10-core CPU, 10-core GPU. And Shoji, I haven't forgotten your question. I am getting to it, I promise. 16 gigabytes of unified memory and 256 gigabytes of SSD storage. I bought this primarily as a demo computer out in the recording studio, but out of curiosity, and we can go back to the main camera here. I attempted editing our videos the last 2 weeks for the main channel on this computer and had great success. This is an incredibly powerful computer. It's a 10-core CPU, 10-core GPU. There is one kind of gotcha with this, which is probably obvious. The internal storage at 250 gigabytes is obviously not sufficient for anything other than operating system and the apps you're going to run. So even with a clean install, the only things I've installed so far are Final Cut Pro, DaVinci Resolve, Studio, Isotope RX. I think I installed a text editor, which is less than like megabyte. And then a few plugins, and that's it. And we're down to 175 gigabytes of storage left. So obviously for doing any sort of video editing, you need an external drive. So because I went down this mad path of sick fascination with seeing how much I could get out of a tiny little computer, we did go and I did buy this external drive. So Danny, if you'd switch to the Mac here, obviously you don't have to go this wild and crazy. This is a very fast Thunderbolt 5 drive that can transfer. Again, the Mac Mini only has a Thunderbolt 4 port, which is 40 gigabits per second, but this one is spec'd at 6,000 megabytes per second, both read and write speed. So I bought this for kind of future proof. It's expensive. It was $550 for 4 terabytes. You can get a 2 terabyte version for $380. We've actually been using a similar earlier version of this one, OWC drive, for Emma, who is our producer and does some of our editing typically. And it's been very reliable. So I would take a look at the OWC Envoy, and they have a series of them. This is the Ultra, which are the fastest ones. but they also have some that are not quite as fast that are more affordable if you need those as well. So I've had good experience with OWC external SSD drives. All right. Hopefully, Shoji, that answers your question. Oh, by the way, what are the other downsides of this? So this is great, but fairly limited on the number of ports, and I have a lot of things connected. It doesn't have the SD card reader like the Mac Studio does, so there's just another no USB-A ports. I prefer to keep my mouse and my keyboard wired. I know that may sound weird to some of you, but I hate when the battery dies in the middle of doing something, so I rather keep that connected. So what I also bought was, if we go back to the Mac, this USB port or USB hub. This is a CalDigit E5. It's a Thunderbolt 5 hub. So again, buying not because I have Thunderbolt 5 on this Mac Mini, but because I wanted it to be future-proof and not have to buy a new one every 2 or 3 years. This one has 3 Thunderbolt 5 ports on the back, a USB-A port on the back, and then on the front it has, 2 USB-C data ports, and then 2 additional USB-A ports, which I believe are USB 3.1 or 3.2. And then, of course, you have this Thunderbolt port on the side here that you connect to your computer. So everything from the computer comes here, or in and out comes here, and then you have all those different ports. And it can also supply up to 90 watts of power. So for me, that one, we've been testing that for about a week now, and it's been good. CalDigit makes some pretty nice products. If you're into it, you can also, there are a bunch of third-party products that fit underneath the Mac Mini and have kind of the same form factor, same shape. They also give you access. One of the big criticisms was the buttons on the bottom here. That's turned out to not be as, I've thought, oh, what a ridiculous decision to put it there. Why couldn't they do it on this, like on the Studio, and just put it on the back, or somewhere back here? I don't know why. But the buttons here, be careful with some of the those add-ons where they give you additional ports, and in some cases they also have an internal SSD slot, so you can put some SSD in there and essentially extend the storage. Watch for the transfer speeds on those. Additionally, some people have complained that when they place their unit on that they get degraded Wi-Fi performance. The bottom here is plastic, so the whole top shell is aluminum, which will block a good bit of the RF that you need for Wi-Fi. The bottom is plastic, so that's how the Wi-Fi propagates, is out the bottom. So be careful with those, and just make sure you do your homework to make sure it's not going to be a problem there. But that's the big thing here, is that you just get this like spaghetti coming off of this thing, because if you have a lot of things that you need to connect, that becomes a challenge. Graham, Curtis, you have very long fingers. You would make a great guitarist, LOL. Would I make a good drummer too? Because I do have a drum kit. Thanks, Graham. All right, Mark says Nikon Z9, NZ8 are compatible with the UltraSync Blue, though I have had mixed results in connecting my Z9. Okay, great. Oh, good, Mark, thanks for that. I knew that Atomos had been working with different companies to try and get compatibility going with cameras, so that's good to see they're making some progress. UltraSync Blue works great with the Mavis app on iPhone 14 Pro, can shoot ProRes 422. Awesome. Thank you, Graham. There's a lot of chatter, it sounds like.
Going in different directions,
a lot of...
so I'm trying to remember where.
Danny says there's a healthy chat going on, which we're happy to see. Love that we can bring you all together as a community here and have some fun discussion. Oh, I should clarify, while Danny's looking for stuff, on the Mac Mini, 16 gigabytes, 10-core GPU, 10-core CPU is definitely enough for like talking head videos. I primarily edited in DaVinci Resolve, but I also tried Final Cut just to see. Final Cut is ultra optimized for Apple Silicon, but DaVinci Resolve did really, really well as well. I was not using the Fusion panel at all, or Fusion page. But for sound or for Fairlight and for edit, it did great. So, and this is a pretty straightforward. If you're doing like a feature film and you're piling on tons of plugins of various sorts, doing heavy color grading. Oh, I did basic color grading, just color correct, basically color correction, just adjusting the contrast a little bit. It did just fine. So if you get heavier than that, that's when you're going to potentially need more. Okay.
There's people giving their opinions about various.
Oh, people giving opinions. Awesome. Matt says, I have the new Mac Mini M4, but Pro. The Pro gives me more processor and gives me Thunderbolt 5. And you're using an OWC Envoy Ultra as well. Very good. The drive is insanely fast and great, and I agree. Even on mine, I was using the little Blackmagic disk speed test. I think I was getting, if I remember right, over 2,000 mega. Is it bits or bytes? Makes a big difference. I don't remember. It was fast. Plenty fast for editing video. Even 8K video if you needed to do that.
Actually, this is interesting. Okay, so here's an opinion on Thunderbolt 5.
Oh, DaVinci says Thunderbolt 5 is total nonsense, gets too hot. Just do daisy chaining. Interesting. Keith says I place all media on a Samsung T7, edit DaVinci Resolve Studio, Mac Studio, M2 Max. Excellent. Okay. Samsung T7s, I think, are pretty fast. I think are those the fast ones? 1 second. These are some older ones. Oh my goodness, it's really almost impossible to read. Older Samsung drives that I use. These are Thunderbolt 3. Can you read the name on this, Danny? They did black on red.
Good grief.
Neither of us can read it.
Portable SSD XS.
Portable SSD XS. I don't know the model number on these then, unfortunately. I don't know if they make these anymore, but they probably have a newer generation. But these are Thunderbolt 3. And they've been very fast, and we've used them at work. Matt says, I have the Sateki. This is the port. This is the little thing you put your Mac Mini on top of and gives you additional ports and an M2 SSD. I have the Sateki, and I have an M2 drive in it, and it's very fast. Okay, cool. Awesome. Robert says, for USB 3.x gigabit speed, you need to be careful about cables. High-speed USB uses 2 additional pairs of transmit and receive wires. Power delivery also requires additional wires. Yes. Good to know. So a lot of times you'll see the ports. Here's the problem with the USB specification. Robert brings up a great point. They aren't required to label the cables with their capabilities, which would be really, really helpful. Thunderbolt, on the other hand, is, at least every Thunderbolt cable I've ever seen, puts the Thunderbolt symbol on there and usually the number of the generation of Thunderbolt that it supports, which is really helpful. I wish USB would do the same thing. And Robert, thank you very much. You bring up a great point. Cables matter when it comes to USB. So keep that in mind. Also, to be clear, with the base model, these ports right here are USB-C, not Thunderbolt. On the Mac Studio, I think and actually probably on the M4 Pro, I think, I'm not positive, but check. Be very careful to check. Don't assume that just because it's a USB-C port on a Mac that it's also Thunderbolt capable. Not all of them are. These are USB-C only. These are Thunderbolt. So, and they're Thunderbolt 4. Chris says you can upgrade internal SSD with 2025 M4 Mac Mini 2 terabyte SSD replacement upgrade DIY. Oh, I'm not that brave. Thank you, Chris.
This is the same thing.
Daniel says for the Mac Mini 4, there are kits you can get to upgrade it to 2 terabytes. Please note that it could void your warranty. I purchased a 2 terabyte kit for $259 USD, and it's been working great. Your mileage may vary. Ooh. Yeah, so if you have a a DIY spirit and the ability and, the willingness to crack something open that has no screws, and potentially void your warranty, that's an option as well. Shoji, thanks for the SSD info and the Mac Mini review. So 256 gigabytes was enough for the apps you use. Yeah, it's tight. I don't like operating that tightly. But what was very interesting is using the activity monitor app. I was expecting a lot more memory pressure and a lot more. I was expecting things to be much slower in terms of exports and things like that. But for 10 to 15-minute videos, there's probably a difference. It's probably not as fast as my M1 Ultra Mac Studio, but not anything that I noticed. No, I mean, it didn't put a crimp in my workflow at all. So it's almost like the CPU and the GPU and the memory are not an issue. The storage is the main thing.
Okay, this is
Two-part here from Lucas. I have a Sony FX3 connected to a Tentacle Sync 2 with the Tentacle USB mini cable, as well as a MixPre 6.2 connected to another Tentacle Sync 2 with 3.5 millimeter cable. It's a new setup for me. 1 second before you move on, Danny. If you go back, I just need to review something here. What is the Tentacle USB mini cable? Okay. So you can connect the Tentacle to the Sony with the USB cable, and then you have with connected to a MixPre 6.2 with a 3.5 millimeter cable. Okay, got it. One day there was a 2 to 4 frame drift, but not for all takes, just for a few hours. Any experience with that? Mine has always been rock solid. Yeah, I've never run into that, to be honest. So on the short films that I've worked on where we did use tentacles, they all lined right up. Does anyone else have experience with that? I'm wondering, I would be most suspicious of the USB cable to the FX3, but I don't know. That's just a guess. A wild guess, not even a hypothesis. Well, here's my thinking. USB is not an analog connection. The 3.5 millimeter is an analog connection. So that's my thinking. But there are other things that could be going on. The MixPre could have muddled things up somehow internally. I don't know. But I have not experienced that with not with any of the Tentacle syncs I've ever used. Oh, very good. Linda says, I like the Crucial X series drives. Very good. Thanks for the input, Linda. Super helpful. There's another option for you, Shoji. Matt Ruff, I went to all Thunderbolt cables because I have no hair left to pull out.
I could work on his beard.
Danny says you could work on your beard. But yeah, that's Thunderbolt cable. The only problem with Thunderbolt cables, of course, is the expense. But if you've got plenty of money to avoid losing hair, Matt, that's a perfectly valid solution. So good for you. By the way, the Thunderbolt cables are made to much higher specifications, obviously. That's why they're so much more expensive. Graham says, I use Synology DS1621 Plus with 6 SSDs and 10 gigabit Ethernet network card linked to Mac Studio, lightning fast. Very cool. Yeah, so that would be very fast and should be good. At work, we were editing from NAS for a while with 10 gigabit Ethernet, and it was an SSD-based NAS. And we had 1, 2, 3, 4, up to 5 people working on that same NAS at the same time. We had some issues. I don't think it was Synology. It was a different brand. But anyway, we eventually retired it because it was a lot less expensive for us to change our workflow. So now what we do is we actually use, believe it or not, we actually use Frame.io as our storage and our review platform. And then we edit locally. And then as soon as we're, then we upload everything, all the original footage to Frame for long-term storage. That's kind of a wild workflow. There's a new one also out there, a competitor to Frame.io, finally, called Shade, that we're looking into as well. John says, I use a Shure wireless mic with XLR out, which plugs into a mixer. Can you recommend a device I can use before the mixer, an XLR in, XLR out recorder, preferably 1 or 2 channel? I don't know of anything that kind of fits that bill. I'm assuming you're trying to keep it inexpensive by having it 1 or 2 channel, but the way I typically do it is I record a feed from the mixer. So the wireless mic would go into the mixer, and then you could configure the mixer to output that wireless mic and then put that and then capture that into a recorder, something like a Zoom F3. So that's how I would usually think about it, John. But I don't know of any that have an XLR input and an XLR output and record just 1 or 2 channels. Curtis, what monitor are you using with the recently purchased Mac Mini? I'm a little embarrassed to say this, but I use the XDR Pro display. It drives it beautifully, but that is a ridiculous monitor. And there's this whole story to why I even have the thing, but let me just suffice it to say that's what I used, and it drove it beautifully. Just that one monitor. That's another thing you have to keep in mind if you're doing a huge multi-monitor setup. You'll want to be careful. Let's go back and see the details on what it can support. Let's just do a search for monitors. What? Displays? They call them displays. Drives up to 3 displays. I think that depends on which one you get, but be careful to make sure that if you have multi-displays, especially if you have 3 displays, that you're getting the right model that can support that. So, okay.
Which display did you say you used?
Pro Display XDR. The most ridiculously expensive monitor
Here's
there
what
is.
Matt uses.
Apple Studio Display. Yeah, I use that one for work, and that one's been pretty good. Also, not as ridiculous as the XDR, but about $1,500 depending on the options you get.
Oh.
We put 5 monitors to the Mac Mini. I don't know how you did that. You are magical.
Okay. In 3 minutes.
Okay, let's go back to the main camera here.
In 3 minutes.
Danny says I have 3 minutes. What are your thoughts on AI and our future as creative professionals? Well, I am not opposed to AI as a tool to help me do things that I want it to help me to do. All of the AI implementations I've used so far, none of them are perfect. Certainly not super intelligence level. I think there are people in the industry that are talking as if super intelligence is within 6 months. Maybe in very niche areas, but I don't see that generally happening anytime soon. I think that as humans, I'm going to get philosophical here for a minute. I think as humans, we will always have a need to express ourselves creatively. So I don't see that need going away. So even if most production turns to AI to generate their content, I foresee people still creating things the old-fashioned way without AI, or just using AI as in very niche little areas as a tool to help produce what their creative vision is that they're trying to produce. So that's my overall perspective on it. We use AI at work. We use ChatGPT and other large language models to do kind of our initial research, maybe help us do a first draft of an outline for a script. A lot of times it ends up missing things that we still need human intervention to get things right. So I see it as a tool if we need a, quick, give me 10 ideas for blah, and you specify what that is in your prompt. I've used in Figma, for example, we use that to design things. I work for Webflow, which is a company that we make website experience platform, so people can build websites using our platform with or without code. You don't have to know how to code to do it, but you can use code if you choose to. But we also use Figma a lot, and Figma has an image generator AI built in. I find those enormously frustrating. In a few cases, they'll produce something that's usable, but in a lot of cases, they don't. I think my biggest frustration with AI, and that has not been kind of sorted out yet, is copyright issues for the learning models, um, especially for the large language models. They're just scouring the internet and regurgitating things, treating it as if they constructed it, and they're like basically just spewing it out. So I have some issues with that from the perspective of someone that owns copyright on material that I've made. I have not granted large language models the right to use those, and yet they are using those for learning, for training their models. So I have some issues with that for sure. So those are my thoughts. Okay, thanks for your thoughts. I like your optimism. Thanks for the question. There's something very refreshing when it is handmade and not a big production run. I agree, Audio Buff. Thank you. Mark says, whenever I have shot anything having to do with AI or robots, I always add the word Skynet to the metadata. They can never say that I didn't see it coming. Good work, Mark. I like that. You kind of just slide that in there. That's brilliant. Okay, friends, fellow Soundies, it's good to chat with you again today. I hope you enjoyed this session as much as I did. Get out there and make some great sound, and we will talk to you again next week. Take care.